This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. What's up, bootlickers? Do you want to start?
Okay. It's felt like you had something.
No, I just thought that'd be funny.
That was pretty funny. Well, I guess this is funny enough now to stay in. Welcome, everybody, to the Cult Popture podcast. This is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast, where every fortnight we discuss a film franchise. And I am AJ, and over there, Richard and I live in different cities. Which I haven't mentioned in a long time. And so what we do is we hop on Google Hangouts together because it's better than Skype and it's better than Discord. Is it perfect? Absolutely not.
Do
not misunderstand what I'm saying. And we talk about a chosen film franchise that we've watched over the last 2 weeks. Richard, what did we watch this fortnight?
Blade.
Blade. The Blade Trilogy.
The Blade Trilogy, that's right.
Oh.
So this is a trilogy consisting of 3 films. Nice change.
You piece of shit. It's like consisting of 3 films, each one of them a movie.
So you've got Blade in 1998, directed by Stephen Norrington. Blade 2 in 2002, directed by Guillermo del Toro. And Blade Trinity 2004, directed by David S. Goyer.
Wonder what the statistic is on like trilogies where one of them is directed by someone you've heard of, but it isn't the first one. Feels like this is, but I guess when he did Blade 2, was del Toro as big as he is now?
No, this was like pre kind of. So he had made Kronos, The Devil's Backbone, and Mimic, and then Blade 2 is kind of. But then, like, I think the success of Blade 2 allowed him to get Hellboy financed, which was his passion project.
But it's so funny because he's got such a magical fairy tale name compared to the other 2 directors in the series.
Stephen Norrington,
or Guillermo del Toro. Like maybe it's because I associate the films with the man now, but even just his name is one. Like it's like same as like Quentin Tarantino is like. I associate what a Quentin.
It's an action-packed name.
Yeah, right. It is though. But anyway, yeah. So this is a Del Toro franchise in some respect, which is our first.
Yeah.
Del Toro. I mean, he's only done Hellboy, I guess. So.
And Pacific Rim.
Ah, yes, that would count.
Yeah. It would.
Oh, actually, and Mimic has 2 sequels. It was suggested on the very Patreon poll that we put up for that ended up in Blade. There is a Mimic trilogy. So there you go.
Wow. And there's also he was attached to The Hobbit for a long time, so he was a producer on that project. So technically, it's not the first thing that he's been involved in that we've covered on this podcast. Anyway, enough dilly-dallying. Blade 1998, what is it about?
So it's based on a Marvel comic series, and this is pre-MCU, so there's no interconnected universe or anything, and it is about a vampire hunter named Eric, or Blade, as he prefers, which if, don't call me Eric, my name is Blade. Very 1998, and he is actually a day walker. So his mum was bit by a vampire while she was pregnant with him, and so he has all the powers and strength of a regular vampire with none of the weaknesses. He can eat garlic, he can walk around in sunlight, and a stake to the heart kills him just like it would kill any person in the world.
But he, the only weakness he does have is the thirst for blood.
Yeah, so he tries to it's more understated in the movie, I think, than it should be, but there's a through line through all 3 films of various ways with which he suppresses his urges with, like, a drug or something. Is that right?
Yeah, well, he has like, a few different ways, like you say, created by his friend Whistler.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Whistler is a human vampire hunter who took Blade off the streets when he was a little kid and has fostered him into the badass vampire slayer he is today. And the first film is about them taking on Deacon Frost, played by Stephen Dorff, who is a vampire, a non-pureblood vampire, so he was bit. He wasn't born a vampire. I think that's what that means. And he basically takes on the vampire elders who have created some sort of system with humans that allows vampires and humans to live in relative harmony. And he thinks that humans should be the cattle with which vampires farm. And so he overthrows the vampiric government and tries to resurrect a ancient vampire series of demons to take over the world with.
Yeah. Nice. Very cool. And how does it end? Blade wins.
Blade wins. I mean, he does unleash the demons, but they've got this what's it? Well, I guess it's a Chekhov's gun, which is a bunch of serum in these various little syringes, which explodes a vampire from the inside out, and Blade, in what is a very cool kickflip, pushes all these syringes into a now possessed Deacon Frost, and it explodes him. And it looks pretty dated, but you know what? It was a fine movie. It was okay.
It is fine. Okay, so that's your opinion of it. It's
fine. Good. It's good. They're fun.
That's good. Do you want to say more about it?
Well, I think that this is a trilogy where by the time I got to the third one, unfortunately, time caught up with it. It's already pushing it by being very 90s in 1998, and then that translates into very 2000s in 2002. But when the third one comes out in 2004, I think people are over the cheesiness. 2004 was a very serious time, Richard. So I don't think people were up for it. But one thing that I did think was interesting is, despite how Matrixy the first one feels like it's inspired by, it predates the Matrix.
It does, yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. So do you think the Matrix stole a lot from Blade?
Maybe it was just more that wearing sunglasses and leather jackets was in the style at the time. But if you were to watch Blade and not know what year it came out in, you would be forgiven for thinking it's just trying to capitalize on the Matrix. Not as good CGI as the Matrix, though, and the Matrix doesn't have great CGI. So I've described this, and we've used this a few times in the podcast, but I've described Blade 1 before as a PlayStation 1 movie. Where its aesthetic is very much that of a PlayStation 1 game. And in this case, the graphics, the CGI, when you see like someone explode into blood, like explosions of blood, are literally no better than a late PlayStation 1 hardware like kind of generated graphics. I was thinking about this, we could do a whole conversation about how the second one's a PlayStation 2 movie and the third one's a PlayStation 3 movie, and the metaphor doesn't not track, but it's definitely not as interesting past the first one, where it just feels like it imbues the spirit of a PlayStation 1 game.
Yeah. All right, yeah, you're right. So let's not have that conversation.
Let's strike it from the record.
Yes, let that be stricken from the record. If anyone comments that they heard that part, I'm going to be mad.
Right. So you literally want me to edit it out of the episode?
Well, no, that was going to be the joke.
Right.
And now we've left this conversation. No.
You've undone. We've done it to each other, because me saying, "Do you want me to edit this out?" was also what I intended to be left in, and would have this funny thing where I was expecting you to say, "Yes, edit it out," and all of this would remain in.
Well, but I didn't want it to look like you hadn't done your job or you'd forgotten about it.
Was it a bit like you didn't want me disrespecting you and getting like one up on you to be recorded as well?
Yeah, I didn't want you to win, I think, is what it is. Is that I don't want you thinking you're better than me.
Well, we've both lost now, so this works out perfectly.
Yeah, well, actually, Joe, I think the listeners have lost because they've had to listen to this.
And we've won.
Yes.
That's what a good podcast should do.
What do you think it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Blade 1?
Yeah.
Let's go 75.
Way fucking off.
Way off?
Yeah.
85?
Way off.
Am I going up or down?
Yep.
95?
Nah.
Just tell me. I hate this game.
55.
55?
Yeah.
Wow, so this wasn't actually that revered.
No.
That's so interesting.
Take back all that. Edit it out.
That's so interesting because people are often comparing the Blade trilogy to have the same sort of lifespan trajectory as the Spider-Man trilogy, the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
No, well, I think it's like Blade's kind of the more underground one, but it does have like the same trajectory, like you said, that it's like promising, pretty good, not very good.
Yeah,
you know, like yeah, but I don't think it's near the same prestige. But
they're not as good
as
no, they're not. Yeah,
no, but that also comes from this was kind of the first big Marvel, like, successful Marvel adaptation. And because there's a funny thing that like Black Panther was like this big, like, oh, it's the first like black superhero, and Deadpool's like it's the first R-rated superhero film, but a lot of people love to point out that Blade was both of those things, and it was like the first superhero movie. But I messaged you while watching this and saying this is like the Detective Pikachu of R-rated superhero movies, where it's like it's the only one to succeed in a certain thing. Like with Detective Pikachu, it's movies based on video games, but it's not something other people can replicate necessarily. Like Blade feels like such a specific character that it's like, maybe it's like, oh, pick a character that it doesn't matter that they're from a comic book,
Yeah. It's because to expand on that metaphor, it's like or simile. Sorry,
you will be
like if someone was going to make a Crash Bandicoot movie, they can't look at what Detective Pikachu did right, because Detective Pikachu has the entire brand of Pokemon which transcends gaming behind it, and it bases it on a Pokemon game that like nobody's played, and so there's not a lesson to be learned that can be replicated. Then the nut hasn't been cracked on video game movies based on Detective Pikachu. When you said to me that Blade was the Detective Pikachu of comic book movies, I thought you were talking about a black protagonist. I didn't realize you were talking about because it's an R-rated one. And I was like, what could he possibly mean? Guess I'll find out. So you're saying, like, even though like Deadpool's touted as the first mainstream R-rated superhero film, Blade did it first, but you can't learn lessons for making a good R-rated superhero film from Blade, whereas you could and people have from Deadpool.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but now that as I'm saying that, I'm like, yeah, I guess you kind of can. Anyway, cut this whole part out. No, but I think it's an interesting thing that it's like these two milestones that were kind of celebrated in the last 5 years were already done, and like quite successfully, really, comparatively for the time period. Because I mean, like, if Blade didn't come out and people were like, oh, actually, people will go see a Marvel adaptation. We might not have had X-Men, and then we wouldn't have had Spider-Man, and then we wouldn't have had, all these things.
Yeah, and I think that it is to those who like to say Blade was the first black superhero movie, or Blade was the first R16 superhero movie. It's also like, yeah, okay, but it also predates the superhero boom, much in the way that Superman. It's like, yes, we know Superman was the first superhero movie, which I'm pretty sure the Phantom. No, it doesn't predate, but the character. Never mind. Cut that part out. Anyway.
It's gonna be a very short podcast by the time it's released.
There's a difference between doing something radical when something's popular and doing something radical before the thing's popular, because it's not radical if you do it before it's popular.
Yeah, because I guess it's like this was before people had a certain expectation going into a superhero movie, but and it's like, yeah, it's not even necessarily, there's nothing about it necessarily that you would register as being a superhero movie.
No,
it's just like an action movie.
It feels borderline ashamed of its comic book origins, Blade.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's the reason we're doing this. We should have mentioned up the top is that it's spooky season, and this is a horror franchise.
Apparently,
which oh my god, so funny. AJ was like, "No, stop," because this was chosen by our lovely patrons on Patreon. We had a poll going that was going to be this episode, and AJ goes, "No, stop the presses.
Shut it down.
Shut it down. We need to choose a horror franchise
because it's Spooktober.
And we got Blade. Yeah."
So we got Blade, which is a monster, and look, it's about vampires, and
it does say on Wikipedia, Blade is a 1998 American superhero horror film,
and it is our second vampire-based film franchise this year, and I think our third overall, with Twilight being the first. I don't know if we've done any other vampire-based horror movies outside of Twilight and Fright Night. And now
I could not tell you, Matt.
Wow. You could do it.
I could, but I won't. So we didn't mention this at all yet, but the film stars Wesley Snipes.
It's been on my frontal lobe this entire time.
So you've got quite a lot to say about Wesley Snipes.
No, just mentioning that he's the star. I feel like that's very pertinent information.
Yeah. We'll probably talk about Wesley Snipes a bit more in the third one because that's where the personality of who Wesley Snipes is kind of takes over a bit more. He was working on getting a Black Panther movie made for a long time, and when that finally properly fell through, he signed on to Blade because this had been in development since 1992, and LL Cool J wanted to star in it.
Oh, yeah.
And then New Line ended up, greenlighting it, and apparently they originally wanted something that was almost a spoof.
I can understand that. Sort of the same thing with like
it's the kind of movie that I can understand a studio exec team worrying about taking seriously,
and they're right to, because this, as we said,
stupid.
Well, it is now. Well, it's not stupid. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, this is very dated and very of its time, but I can still appreciate that. If you made the Blade 1998 verbatim today, it wouldn't get more than 50% on Rotten Tomatoes.
And then also starring in this film, we mentioned The Whistler, which is played by the lone dinosaur himself, Chris Christopherson.
Wow, our second Chris Christopherson franchise after The Land Before Time.
And he, what did you think of the character of The Whistler? Did you think it was a good adaptation of the character from the comics?
The comics I'm very familiar with. I liked Whistler. I thought he was a cool character.
Yeah, but what, like, compared to his comic book counterpart?
I don't know. I haven't read the comics.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway because he's not in them.
Wow! Imagine if I tried to fake that.
Yeah, I was hoping you would.
Like when you give a drunk person water and tell them it's vodka.
But okay, so what did you think of his like kind of debut appearance then in Blade?
I liked him. He's cool.
Oh, so I did trick you because he's not in the comics. He was created by David S. Goyer for this movie, but it's not his debut as a character. He was created for this movie, but he debuted on Spider-Man the Animated Series.
Interesting. Wow, that's really interesting. So it's like how Harley Quinn debuted on the animated Batman series.
Yeah, so he it was an episode of the Spider-Man the Animated Series featuring Blade, and they like kind of created this character. They used this character that was being developed for the Blade movie.
Wow, cool,
interesting. Yeah,
very cool. He feels like a comic book, like with a name like Whistler.
That's the thing. Like it's so, and like this older kind of Southern gentleman. Who's the mentor, he retired vampire hunter. It feels so pulpy. And so I guess that's a credit to David S. Goyer, who would, later in his career kind of go off the rails in terms of quality of comic book writing, because he would go on to do Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and have this whole rant about how you can't do Martian Manhunter on film because that's fucking goofy, and how She-Hulk only exists because the Hulk is such a male power fantasy that he'd split in half any woman he tried to fuck, so they made She-Hulk so that Hulk would have someone to fuck. These are like his words, presumably not realizing that She-Hulk is Hulk's cousin. But anyway, so that's
it's all
David
green,
Esquire
baby.
for you. What'd you say?
I said it's all green, baby. I think okay. So with Whistler, I did think he had the best line in the first film, which again, it's weird thinking that he wasn't invented earlier because I can see this happening in someone being like, "This is classic Whistler," which is when Blade and the love interest are cornered in this like. Where they keep like the vampire Bible scrolls, like this museum of sorts,
the elder
and
texts.
all these, and all these vampires run in and they corner them and start attacking them, and then Whistler explodes open the wall and walks in and goes, "I catch you fuckers at a bad time," and then shoots them all up, which I thought was very fun. A lot of good one-liners. Haven't watched a movie with a lot of good one-liners in ages, Richard. What did we watch last fortnight? Oh, The Godfather, one of the most famous treasure troves of one-liners in history, but action one-liners, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen a good.
Some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill.
What's that from?
That's from Blade. It's like the most famous line from Blade.
What? Say it again.
Some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill.
Damn, that's deep.
It is.
Wow. Yeah. What did you think of Blade?
It's that same kind of. I mean, obviously, it's not as good as the first Spider-Man, but I do like that it's not an origin story. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's just like we're just jumping in on Blade, and he's an established hunter. We don't have to see him learn the tricks of the trade. But yeah, it's good enough. Like, I was logging these films on Letterboxd this week, and I noticed that a friend of mine at work had marked them all as seen. And I asked him about, I was like, "You've seen the Blade movies?" And he was like, yeah, I have." And I was like, "Oh, what do you like? What do you think of them?" And he was like, I mean, I don't know, like they're fine, kind of thing. And I think that's kind of, I imagine that for a lot of people, and I know some people listening that were talking in the Discord about these films were like, "Oh my god, I'm so ready for the discussion chat about this film series because I have so much to say about them." And I'm like, how?
Yeah, well, the discussion chat on the Discord, which everyone listening to this should join, might be a little bit more fruitful than our discussion for this episode. Because we were both like, "Is this a talker episode?" And we were both like, "Oh, not really." And we'll still make
we were both like, "Nah, should we
but...
just set up a gag at the start about how we're going to cut stuff out of the podcast, and then if in doubt, we can just go back to that."
Dude, cut that out. Wait, I'm the one who cuts things out.
Yeah.
What I'd like Stephen Dorff. Are you familiar with the work of Stephen Dorff?
He's someone whose name I am very familiar with.
So he played Deacon
just through
Frost.
knowing his name. But I don't know how familiar I am with his work.
The only other thing I've seen him in is in True Detective Season 3, where he's a much... What's wrong with that? What's wrong with me seeing him in True Detective Season 3?
Oh, it's just predictable.
Well, I'm sorry that it's predictable.
Okay.
Should I not say it, Richard? Should I just move on?
No, go.
He's much older in True Detective Season 3, which is all I'd seen him in. And then I knew he was in Blade 1, and when he turns up, I actually was like, "That's not him, he's too young." And then I was like, "Oh, wait, this is 21 years earlier than True Detective Season 3. So... he looks good young. He looks like a Backstreet Boy. Like an evil Backstreet Boy.
Yeah, he looks like a 1998 villain. He is Skeet Ulrich. Ulrich was lobbied for the role of Frost, who played Billy Loomis in Scream.
Oh, yeah.
And also Mark Wahlberg apparently was offered the role.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah, you're gonna get offered a role if you're Mark Wahlberg.
In 1998.
Yeah. Well, we spoke in Fright Night about vampire lore, because they had stuff about how it was like deep cuts of vampire lore.
Yeah, it was like
they can turn into wolves.
They can turn into wolves, which has apparently always been part of actual vampire lore and just not really pop culture's understanding of vampire lore. And they can turn into mist and other animals other than bats and things like that.
But so Blade was kind of they had a chance to update that lore. I mean, I guess like anything, there's a John Landis quote where he says, "How do you kill a vampire?" You say, "Oh, stake through the heart, garlic, or silver bullet," and he says, "No, you kill a vampire whatever the fuck you want. They're not real."
Yeah, lore is just that.
Like,
lore is what you make up.
Like, I could make it like. I mean, this is Twilight. It's a prime example that they're vampires, but it's like, oh, they can only have their head ripped off, and they don't die in the sunlight. They just sparkle, and it makes them.
If anything, Twilight's quite a clever sort of revisionist's history of vampires,
because it's like, oh, this is how it shows you how stories can be altered over time.
Yeah. Twilight is more clever than Blade and Fright Night.
But apparently, in updating and kind of cherry picking what they wanted to use from vampire lore, they decided against using crosses because they were like, well, what if a vampire is Jewish? Why would a cross affect him?
Well, yeah. I don't think vampires are affected by crosses because they're Christian. I think if you're looking at why that would be offensive to use crosses, it's because the mythology of the film then states that Christianity is the one true religion, right?
Well, I guess that's why they chose. That's maybe another reason they.
If a Jewish vampire should be just as scared of a cross as another vampire, I guess that's the case.
Lastly, I'll just on the first Blade movie, then we'll move on. Just kind of talking about the origins of the Blade comic book character because it's probably important to mention. So the character was created in 1973 as a supporting character in the 1970s comic The Tomb of Dracula. And in the comic, Blade's mother was bitten by a vampire while she was in labor with Blade, and the character was not originally the Daywalker, as he's known, but a human being immune to being turned into a vampire, lacking the superhuman strength and speed of his undead quarry. He relied solely on his wits and skill until he was bitten by the character Morbius. Played by Jared Leto in next year's Morbius, as seen in Peter Parker's Spider-Man 8, first published in August 1999, so after this film. So remember we spoke about in Spider-Man how they did this big convoluted thing where like Peter Parker turned into a spider, and then that spider like cracked open and a clone of Peter Parker with all of his memories came out, but the only difference was he had organic web shooters to kind of bring that over from the Raimi film. He became the Daywalker in the comics because after the release of this film, presumably to do that.
It's because the script writers came up with the term Daywalker, and these guys were like, fuck, that's great.
Yeah.
We should have called the whole comic Daywalker.
And Deacon Frost also differs from his comic counterpart. He retains Frost's upstart ambitions, but he was a great deal younger and more updated for the 1990s.
It's always the way. Yeah. It's always the way.
It's fucking 100% of the time. That's the way. So, Blade 2, 2002. That came out in 2002, as I just fucking said. And it was directed by Guillermo del Toro, as we mentioned up top. What is Blade 2 about, AJ?
So, Blade 2 is about, there's sort of a more evolved version of vampires running amok that can also kill vampires, and the difference is instead of just biting, their jaws open up sort of like a python, and they have a tongue that shoots out.
Yeah, so it like at the chin, running like down, through your kind of middle two teeth. It like splits open that way. And then a kind of almost like the face, it looks like the face hugger in Alien.
It's on our Instagram if people want to look at it.
Yeah, there's a
or
dog,
just Google
usually.
it. Almost definitely faster.
Yeah.
So that Blade is recruited by the vampire underground, which previously saw him as their enemy, because now they've got a common enemy. And so they go up against these vampires, these super evolved vampires. There's a reveal at the end of that the super evolved vampires all stem from like a failed experiment from the underground vampires, like the vampire pope, essentially. And so then it ends with Blade going against both the superpowered vampire and the underground vampires who he thought were his allies. And he defeats them both, and everyone dies, and except for Blade. Whistler died in the first one, but is saved at the start of this one. So I guess that's somewhat relevant. And there's one of the underground vampires is kind of his love interest in this, though they never like seal the deal.
The original script had a sex scene between them.
Oh, there you go.
Like every film, pretty much. I think, can't remember if it has in the first one, but they all have like, there was originally a scripted sex scene between Blade and this character.
I hope so. Feels like
Fuck, I hope I can get my hands on that script, eh?
But she gets bit by the evolved vampire before Blade can defeat him, and so she's going to turn into a evolved vampire, but she doesn't want to. So she's like, "I want to see the sunrise," and so he carries her out to the sunrise, and they watch it together as she burns up in the sunlight. And what I thought while watching this, and I wonder if we can unpack this. Very Del Toro, yeah,
right.
Like a tragic, one character holding their love interest in a doomed situation. Because The Shape of Water has something similar at the end. Pan's Labyrinth, while it's not a romantic relationship, has something similar towards the end.
Pacific Rim,
because it's a very Greek-looking image holding someone right as they die.
Yeah.
And Pan's Labyrinth, of course, is Greek as shit. Del Toro himself, though, not Greek.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the kind of like the classic Del Toro thing, because that design of the mouth opening up like that, like that's classic Del Toro to me. And I'd seen that before, and I just assumed it was from Pan's Labyrinth, because he directed a Simpsons intro, or at least there's one. I think he directed it, a couch gag, and it has references to all of his films, and I recognized it from that. And I was just like, oh yeah, that must be part of Pan's Labyrinth. So when it happened in this, I was like, oh my god, I recognize this. The fuck?
I'd seen Blade 2 before somewhere in a long lost dream. You know what I mean? Like when I was 10, I think my brother taped it on TV, and I saw bits and pieces.
And you watched it in your dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you actually hadn't seen Blade 2?
No.
You dreamed it.
And to be fair, Blade 1 does have this as well, but Blade 2 especially has some really nice like prosthetic effects that they play with that are very fun to look at. And the one scene I remembered from Blade 2 was when they capture one of these a dead evolved vampire, and they crack open its rib cage and find that it's like its heart is encased in bone, and you have to like stab it from the side. And they also discover they like are able to open up its mouth, you know, and the many different categories of the mouth, you know, like their tongue, they dissect that.
Like
I remember that scene. I remember watching that scene when I was like 10 or 11 and being like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. Which I'm glad I was able to experience that, because it's very gory. Is the second one R18?
I'm not sure about like specific rating, but they're all definitely R.
It feels like it's a bit more than R16. But it's very cool, very Del Toro to dissect a vampire body. I thought was the type of shit that he loves doing. And they pour like a bit of blood on this like very realistic looking organ in the center of its body, and it like starts squirming and stuff.
Because it's like the body is still feeding even though the person's dead. Actually, it was rated R rather than R18 and that's why the evolved vampires have green blood to keep the rating down.
Of course. There you go. And there's no sex scene.
Yeah. Damn. Okay, so what did you think of this one? Would you agree that it's clearly the best one?
It's clearly the best one, but at the same time, I rated both the first two 3.5 stars.
Yeah, I think I rated the same as you. Oh, did I rate Blade Trinity? I think I forgot to.
You did not. I've been waiting for you to do it.
Oh my god.
I just look at Letterboxd and refresh it to see what you put.
What did you rate it?
I rated it 2 stars.
2 stars. Very cool. Yeah, I'll just give it the same.
Oh, there we go. It is clearly the best one. I think the story's really good. I'm not a big fan of the Whistler retcon at the start. It's not that I don't like I do like Whistler, but a retcon for a character death always feels like really thinly veiled, the writers being like, we shouldn't have killed him in the first one.
Okay,
Like, we gotta bring him
I do want
back.
to talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned that while I was quickly reviewing it. I just saw one of my friends reviewed Scream and said, a classic scary movie that very disappoints, with laughs and a few jump scares. I think she misused the word very when she maybe meant to say rarely. Anyway, so when the movie started and it was like, we have to go find Whistler, he's still alive, and he's like not himself kind of thing. And there's the scene where he leaves him in a room and he's like, these blinds are going to open whether you're human again or not, because he's been turned into a vampire. So it's essentially like, hey, like either the little bit of Whistler that is inside you come out or you're going to die. And I was like, when the movie started, it was this hunt for Whistler. I was like, I don't mind the retcon because that's such a cool idea for a sequel, is that just it's the hunt for Whistler. And then the film would end presumably with Whistler finally coming back to his old lone dinosaur self. And then, they would team up to fight the bad guy. And I was like, that would have been a cool sequel. But then it ends up just being like the pre-credits sequence.
Yeah, my rule of thumb is retcons are all good if it's, or like reset buttons are all good if it's the entire plot. Spider-Man 2 is all of Spider-Man 2 is leading to a reset button of the decision he makes at the start of Spider-Man 1, right? Because of this, at the end of Spider-Man 1. Because at the end of Spider-Man 1, he's like, no, I can't be with MJ. And to immediately retcon that at the start of the next movie would make the whole point of the first film feel like nothing. But if you spend the entirety of the movie exploring why and how and what, then I think that justifies it.
Because clearly it's like, we just want to bring Chris Christopherson back as Whistler. But yeah, you can justify it if, because it's essentially just like resetting the status quo rather than doing something interesting story-wise. Although we are introduced to Scud, who's Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead.
Our second Norman Reedus franchise.
After Boondock Saints. Who ends up being a traitor against Blade. And as IMDb points out, when they're doing the dissection scene you mentioned, the woman's like, squeeze that tooth, Scud, and he doesn't want to, and Blade calls him a sissy, which isn't like Blade because he likes humans, but at the end it's revealed he's always known that Scud was a traitor, so it makes sense that he would call him a sissy in that scene.
Because he likes humans. Okay, that's definitely a exaggerated trait of Blade. I want to talk about that.
Well, I mean, he does. He protects humans.
Yeah, but he doesn't. I don't think calling him a sissy is outside of his character, regardless of if it's. Anyway, I was very conflicted on that because I actually knew it was coming, because that's another thing I actually do remember from when I'd seen this the first time, is that he's revealed to be a traitor and a familiar of Ron Perlman's vampire, and a familiar is like a human who's being a real simp for a vampire and hopes that they'll one day get turned. So he gets killed because Ron Perlman's character has this bomb on the back of his head that Blade puts there to like keep him in line, and then he tries to blow it up and it doesn't work, and then Scud takes it off and is like, it's a decoy because I'm actually on their side, and then he's like, what do you want to say to that? And he goes, it's not a decoy, and he presses the button, and Scud looks at the bomb in his hand and he goes like, no, or something like that, and it's very, very cheesy. I remember that scene. And look, I think I like that beat, but it feels like something that wasn't planned from the start. It feels like...
Well, it's inconsequential.
Yeah, and it feels like Scud... With a character betrayal, you've really got to set that up from the start.
Yeah, because we see Scud alone fighting vampires.
We see Scud alone fighting vampires, which isn't something he wouldn't not do if he was double crossing, but it feels weird to see this character alone, like terrified that he's going to get killed, and make it out by the skin of his teeth, no pun intended, and then find out he was secretly a bad guy the whole time. I don't know if I bought it, and it feels like they needed the beat, and during the screenwriting process they were like, oh, what if Scud is a bad guy the whole time and not it wasn't played from the start. And then he's gone for the rest of the story, and it's like
he fucking blew up.
Yeah, but it's like this was a very important character in the first act.
Yeah, because he had this kind of relationship with Whistler because while Whistler was gone for quite a while, Scud stepped into that kind of role. And
it's a shame because you don't. So now we're seeing like all of this seems to be based around. My theory is that halfway through production, they're like, well, we've got to get Chris Christopherson back because Scud fulfills the role that Whistler could fulfill, but then they bring Whistler back, and so they have no need for Scud, and so they're like, oh, he's a bad guy the whole time, let's kill him off. Instead of him just being the new Whistler. And then, spoilers for Blade Trinity, Whistler dies in the first act. So it's like, they didn't need to bring Whistler back. Scud could have been the Whistler of Blade 2, and then maybe Scud could have died in Blade Trinity.
And we would have felt that betrayal because, as it stands, Blade's just like, I always knew.
Yeah,
so like, it doesn't serve a purpose to the characters or the plot. It's like, there's no information from the first 2 acts that's completely recontextualized because we know that Scud is a traitor.
That's a great way to put it.
It doesn't advance Blade's character at all because he's not betrayed. He doesn't learn anything. And then it doesn't further the bad guy's plot by having someone in Blade's corner this whole time. Or it doesn't further Blade's plot that he knew this guy was a bad guy the whole time. It's just it's a single beat of I'm a bad guy. Yeah.
And on that as well, it's funny you mentioned like furthering Blade's story. Blade seems to have like non-arcs in all 3 movies, right? Where he doesn't actually change or learn anything. He's just always the moral center of the story, which feels like one of those things. Like Wesley Snipes strikes me as the kind of actor who'd be like, nah, my character doesn't show weakness. My character doesn't need to learn anything because he's the best.
Okay, so that's interesting you bring that up. So, because Wesley Snipes, like, it's hearing David S. Goyer, Del Toro, and like Stephen Norrington all talk about Wesley Snipes. They're all like, "Oh my god, this guy knows Blade. Like, every single character decision he makes is the right one. If you're ever discussing something and he makes a suggestion, it's the right one," kind of thing.
That's like, dangerous filmmaking, isn't it?
And that he was like, not more just like, holy shit, you're right. Not like, let's all bend over.
Yes, Mr. Snipes.
It's just that he like kind of knew the character inside and out. And you see him in these films, and you're like, are you a good actor by doing this, or are you just kind of day walking, sleepwalking through this performance? But on returning to the character of Blade, Wesley Snipes said, "I love playing this role. It's fun as an actor to test your skills at doing a sequel to see if you can recreate something that you did." Now, that doesn't strike me as like a Wesley Snipes quote that he would say about like returning to this very serious kind of monosyllabic almost character of Blade. It's a very strange thing to hear him say, and then especially knowing his behavior on the 3rd film, which we'll get to. It's weird to hear him talk about like, oh my god, I love playing Blade. This is gonna be so fun.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. This is our 2nd, or I guess 3rd franchise to contain either a reference to or the character itself of Doctor Strange.
Really?
Because during the fight with Nomak in the church part of the House of Pain, the stained glass window is a replica of Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto.
Right.
Where Del Toro is a fan of the character and was developing a Doctor Strange movie with Neil Gaiman, but the project was rejected by Marvel at the time. So obviously the MCU contains multiple references to and the character of Doctor Strange, but also the Hellraiser film, directed by Scott Derrickson, who would later go on to direct Doctor Strange, contained the Eye of Agamotto sewn into the leather of Pinhead's costume.
Where is Scott Derrickson's Blade film? Why didn't he do a Blade film?
I don't know, dude.
Get him on the horn.
Okay, hello.
Hi, this is Scott Derrickson. I sound like AJ. What of it?
I was just wondering why you never made a Blade film.
Because I don't work with Marvel anymore, okay? I'm going to make a horror movie now. Goodbye. Rude. No
That
wonder
was rude.
Marvel
That's
doesn't want to work with him.
The original idea for this film, speaking of Marvel characters, the original idea for this film was David Goyer's idea was to use Morbius as the primary villain. But Marvel decided they wanted to retain the rights to the character instead and make an entirely separate franchise out of Morbius, i.e. a Morbius film. And you know what? 19 years later, they would finally do that in 2021's Morbius starring Jared Leto. Which was supposed to come out this year, but obviously due to the ongoings, I'm referring to the COVID-19 pandemic, if you're listening to this from the future and you've forgotten about that.
You're forgetting about one of the most defining events of your lifetime. Well, here we go.
Do you reckon, like, people were, like, placing time capsules in, like, September, October, November 2001 were like, 9/11 just happened. I don't know if you guys still remember that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
the dinosaurs were like, we all just died out. That was a big deal.
Well, I think it depends on how long COVID's effect is, right? Because say best case scenario, it's more or less contained.
It just stops tomorrow.
It's more or less contained within like a year. Yeah. You've then got a couple of years of fallout because of lockdowns and economic sacrifices and things.
Yeah.
So overall, like, COVID could be a 5-year thing, or it could be a 50-year thing. I don't know. It depends how. Like, we have no idea. Like, people anticipate it's going to be gone soon because we can't fathom the idea of it not going away anytime soon.
That's the thing, yeah.
Like, and it could be.
Like in March, April, May, people were talking about like, oh, this time next year. And it's just like it was just a given that, like, things will be fine. Oh yeah, I was supposed to move to the US, but it'll be fine like this time next year. It's like, well,
everyone's going to be trying to get into New Zealand.
We're get out. Can't come.
We don't want any, well, that feels dangerous and against my usual beliefs around immigrating, but you never know. Maybe we'll need to get some shotguns and start fighting COVID vampires.
I see you've been reading my notes for the episode.
Yeah. I could see them in the reflection. So Richard, his webcam is set up with a gigantic mirror in the background. So I always see the back of him as well as the front of him. And I can actually see myself waving right now. And I can see his notes. They are absolutely not too small for my webcam, his web camera to pick up.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts on Blade 2?
No. But are we going to talk about your notes?
Just finish the episode. No, yeah, the notes, I think that was a good note to end on. Oh, no pun intended, but my God.
Oh, God.
What an excellent pun.
Wow.
Okay, so Blade Trinity. I tried to pronounce that funnily, but I mumbled a little bit. And
then you said funnily.
Yeah, in a funny manner. Blade Trinity 2004, directed by David S. Goyer. So he wrote all these movies. Interestingly as well, the second film is the only film in Del Toro's filmography that he doesn't have any writing credit on.
Oh, wow.
Which is, maybe that Scud beat would have worked a little bit better if he'd had something to do with
it. Do you know what? That actually makes me feel okay about questioning the Scud beat. Because I'd be like, Del Toro's pretty good. I don't want to imply anything, but if he didn't write it, then yeah, absolutely. The hashtag Scudbeat.
So what is Blade Trinity about?
Blade Trinity is about Dracula has been resurrected by a bunch of evil vampires, and Whistler gets killed, so Blade teams up with Whistler's hot daughter and Ryan Reynolds to go and defeat Dracula.
And who's Ryan Reynolds playing?
He plays...
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, he plays Ryan Reynolds in a very early Ryan Reynolds role.
Yeah.
And Amanda... What's her name? What's
Jessica Biel.
Jessica Biel. Why was I thinking Amanda Biel? Jessica Biel plays New Whistler. You've also got Natasha Lyonne in our second Natasha Lyonne franchise after American Pie. And you've got Patton Oswalt, who dies after almost as soon as he's introduced. And there's a very cringy scene where he's kind of like the Q of the Night Stalkers, which are the new crew of vampire hunters that Blade
Trinity.
joins. Yeah. Well, not really. They are Trinity. And so Patton Oswalt's like showing them all the gear that he's made, but before he does, when Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel walk up and he goes, "Oh, hi, hottie." And I was like, "Oh God, Patton Oswalt, no!" And what happens in the end? So a lot of people die except for Blade, Ryan Reynolds, Jessica Biel, and Natasha Lyonne's daughter. They defeat Dracula, who's played by the guy from Prison Break.
Is it him? Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And it's not very good. It's very cheesy. It's not just that the shtick is old, it's also quite tonally different because Ryan Reynolds adds a very specific flavor of comedy that
the exact same flavor as Deadpool,
which doesn't really work when it's not. The same thing happened with Hobbs and Shaw. So this is our third Ryan Reynolds franchise.
Yeah.
And when he shows up in Hobbs and Shaw,
no, do you know it's our fourth because he's also in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
He is too. I always thought that in Hobbs and Shaw, it's like Ryan Reynolds this is like you're making a steak and then you douse it in like chocolate sauce. And it's like, I like chocolate sauce, fine. But I wanted a steak.
But I hate steak.
Not that fucking Fast and Furious is a steak either, but the metaphor still works.
They don't mix.
And anyway, we're seeing a similar thing here where it's like, look, I can watch a Ryan Reynolds movie. I do not dislike him at all. I may be a little bit over the style for a bit, but Deadpool is fun. I like Deadpool. I like Deadpool. I like Detective Pikachu. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Blade is such a self-serious character, and the movie takes itself seriously as well, that when you introduce a wisecracking character, it's not, I don't think it works as well.
Yeah.
And so he's part of the reason it's not very good. But also, the guy from Prison Break is a similarly difficult actor to take seriously because he's such an American-looking man, and he's playing like an ancient Dracula. And there's what's her name? The main girl vampire.
Parker Posey.
Parker Posey is terrible in this.
Our second Parker Posey franchise, is it?
What else is she in?
She's in. Let me just fact check myself. She's in Scream 2, Scream 3.
Right. She's very bad in this.
Because she. Yeah. No. What? Yeah. She's in Scream 3. Anyway.
There's also a wrestler in this.
Yeah, Triple H.
Triple H. I didn't know he was a wrestler, but I saw his name was Triple H, and I was like, That's a dumb
name. I mean, like, he looks like a wrestler. Oh, it's also got John Michael Higgins in it.
Who's he?
He's Wayne Jarvis in what movie? What's he Wayne Jarvis in? Is it Arrested Development?
Yeah. He's in Arrested Development. Yeah.
And he's the in Pitch Perfect. He's Elizabeth Banks's co-host. That's kind of like his big role, I guess.
He's in a bunch of movies, like Adam Sandler kind of, Happy Madison kind of movies.
Yeah, he shows up in things like that.
And again, not an actor I
dislike, but it's weird to see him in this.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah.
It is a strange collision of worlds. So, Blade Trinity, what would you say it has on Rotten Tomatoes?
What was the second one on Rotten Tomatoes?
Good question. What do you think it was? So first one was 55.
60?
No, not quite.
65.
57.
57.
So I will give you a hint. The second one is the highest rated film in the franchise.
No shit. Are you serious?
The second one was, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said the third one. And I was like, what candy world are we living? What
candy-ass world? Okay, so what do you think the third one has?
Let's go 33.
Oh, very nice, but it's 26. Also, just out of interest, first one has a 78% audience score, second one has 68, and the third one has 59. So they go 1, 2, 3, and almost by 10% each time. So this had like a famously troubled production. Wesley Snipes was kind of a bit of a asshole to work with, a bit pretty like troublesome to work with by the sounds of it. This is according to various sources. So Wesley Snipes was apparently unhappy with the film's script and original choice of director. David S. Goyer, who had written all 3 films in the franchise, was then selected to replace the original director of the film, which Snipes also protested. I actually couldn't see who was the original director, weirdly. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. Let me just like quickly... No, it doesn't say. Anyway. Snipes reportedly caused difficulty during filming, including frequently refusing to shoot scenes, often forcing director Goyer to use stand-ins and computer effects to add his character to scenes. So there's like the scene in the car where Hannibal, which is Ryan Reynolds' character, is like talking about Jessica Biel in the back seat, and he's like, yeah, she likes to listen to music, and he like describes the music she's into, and he's like, me, I'm more of a David Hasselhoff fan. And you can see online there's all the DVD extras, like essentially like a Judd Apatow style riff through a bunch of different artists, and he says a bunch of different lines, and Ryan Reynolds was kind of allowed to do that because like, let's just fucking film whatever, and then we'll just get Wesley on set, and he just has to look at you blankly and then look towards where you're driving. And so it's literally like Ryan Reynolds is like, do whatever you want. And so this was kind of his first introduction to like, just go wild, just be silly. I mean, I guess he was in Van Wilder before this, which probably has more opportunities to be silly, but... And
2 guys and a girl.
Yeah, and a pizza place.
Oh.
That's not a separate thing. I was continuing the title of what you said.
Oh.
Co-star Patton Oswalt alleged that Snipes would spend much of his time smoking marijuana in his trailer, and that he became violent with Goyer after falsely accusing him of racism. It has also been alleged that Snipes refused to interact with Goyer or his co-stars and would instead communicate with them through his assistant or the use of post-it notes. Snipes also allegedly referred to co-star Ryan Reynolds as a cracker on 1 or more occasions.
That's okay. He is a cracker. It's Ryan Reynolds. It's Ryan Reynolds. I thought Ryan Reynolds was so bad in this movie. Like, Wesley Snipes may have been bad offset or behind the camera, but on camera, he's fine.
He's... I don't know, because there's the scene that you talked about where they had to... Oh, you talked about off-pod, I mean, that where they had to CGI... Blade's eyes open because Wesley Snipes.
Well, it's actually a deleted scene which I discovered while watching the film and was like, "Where's the funny CGI eyes scene?" Which is probably for the best that it didn't make it in because it looks awful.
Yeah. So
this is when they think he's dead in a morgue, and then he opens his eyes to reveal he's alive. And in the movie, that's just not what happens. Well, he it's hard to explain. I won't bother explaining it. But yeah, look up.
Yeah, we'll cut this part out.
Look up Blade Trinity CGI eyes scene. You'll find screenshots of it. There's actually not a clip of it on YouTube, or there's like someone filming their TV annoyingly. So that's pretty funny. It's a pretty funny protest to just be like, I'm not going to open my eyes.
Yeah, and we're back. We just took a quick break to save, but while we were doing that, I found out a little bit more information behind the scenes of Wesley Snipes being troublesome. So the falsely accusing David S. Goyer of racism was apparently because he saw the only black crew member wearing a t-shirt that said garbage on it.
Is that David S. Goyer's fault? Did he give everyone a uniform?
Well, I mean, I think that's the point, is that it wasn't David S. Goyer's fault, but
right. Look, I'll be the first to throw shit at David S. Goyer, but
and
we do need to examine these things.
He also tried to push for a sex scene with Jessica Biel.
Look, I was going to say something real gross.
What?
I was going to be like, well, could you blame him? But obviously, that shouldn't be in there.
Saying you were going to say it and then saying it anyway, surely that's just
okay.
As gross.
So let me explain why I shouldn't.
Well,
have
we'll
said
cut
it,
this all out anyway, so it doesn't matter. But explain for me.
It's always a red flag when an actor is like, we should have a sex scene. Then you're, and an actor should never want to have a sex scene. It's like being president.
An actor shouldn't want to have sex.
You shouldn't want to be president. If you want to be president, you shouldn't be president. And similarly, if you're pushing for a sex scene with an actress or an actor,
Jesus,
then maybe that's a good incentive to not do it. Unless I guess they truly believe that the character.
Yeah.
But this is Blade Trinity.
At least he, in some way, cared about Jessica Biel. That's a funny mistake that I made because it was what I was segueing into was that one of the TV commercials, the TV spots for the film, was recalled after it being aired for a day because it credited Jessica Biel as Jessica Alba.
That's amazing.
Yeah. There's also, speaking of Jessica Biel, there's a shot in this film when it's very brief, but I was like, that's kind of like, how'd they get that? Because she does this bit where she is a bow and arrow, and there's one scene where like a shot flies directly at the camera, and I was like, fuck. And like obviously they have ways of doing this where it's just like plexiglass and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, that's pretty amazing. But turns out she actually like they have this massive plexiglass screen, except for which was just had a hole where the lens was like 2 inches by 2 inches. And she was like 50 feet away and managed to hit directly into the lens and like
that's pretty cool.
Destroy a $300,000 camera.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. There's footage.
Hell yeah.
There's footage of it on YouTube of her like reacting to having destroyed a camera. She just fucking cracks up.
Imagine owning that camera and you're watching like the one person on set you're not allowed to get angry at laughing at you.
Yeah.
You're laughing. A camera is broken and you're laughing.
Oh, predictable AJ being
good.
predictable again.
Oh, come on, man. Say something nice about me so I can be motivated to finish the podcast.
All right. Well, anyway, that's all we have time for.
What? I look good today.
Yeah, you're wearing like a leather jacket.
I have a leather jacket now.
I couldn't tell if that was the seat. I was like, either you've lost a lot of weight from your shoulders and you're sitting and you're real thin on a chair, or those are your shoulders. And it's both.
Yeah, man. I got this jacket from the late night thrifty store.
Can you stand up and give us a twirl, and I'll describe it to the podcast.
Serena and Chris, they opened up a late night thrifty store. It's very cool. You should go check it out if you live in Christchurch. Here, okay, I'm standing up.
Okay.
Disappointing you with how fat I still am.
Wow, yeah, that it's a very like motorbikey jacket because it's got quite big arms, or is that just that you've got quite short arms and it's?
I have very broad shoulders.
Yeah,
I've always had broad shoulders.
Nice, very cool. Do you want to do the rest of the podcast from over there?
So Blade Trinity. I have no idea how that's going to even sound with the various filters and things I put on the audio. Hopefully that'll come through.
Otherwise, we'll just cut this part out. Okay, so do you have any final thoughts on Blade Trinity? It's clearly the worst one of the film, but I will say this: it's enjoyable in a Spider-Man 3 kind of way. I think, in that it's a bit of a train wreck, but you gotta love it.
The distance each sequel rises and falls is the same as the distance between Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3's rise and fall, but we're operating on a lower threshold immediately with Blade. Is that making sense? So
not at all.
So Blade 2 and Spider-Man 2 are both like, let's say, 30% better than Spider-Man and Blade, and then Blade Trinity and Spider-Man 3 are both 50% worse than Spider-Man 2 and Blade 2. But Blade was operating at a lower capacity already.
Yeah.
That was fun. I enjoyed describing that.
I'm glad you did, and I hope that you, dear listener, enjoyed listening to it. So we've now got a few segments. Do you want to talk about titles? What do you think of the fact of Blade 2, Blade Trinity?
I think that Trinity is quite a cool word to use to signify your third chapter, but I would have preferred if it was Blade, Blade Returns, Blade Trinity.
Ooh, Blade Returns.
Well, whatever. Like I don't like that you've done 2 and then.
Do you know what it should have been? It should have been. There was like he's cloned.
Don't say
and
blades.
Then there's a second blade. Huh?
Don't you say blades.
No, it should have been Blade and then Blade, comma, TOO question mark. So it's Blade.
Like
Blade 2.
Like look who's talking to.
And so but it's different. It's a word, it's not a number. And so there would be a line in the film where he goes, "Wait, but I'm Blade. How can you be Blade 2?
How can you be Blade as well?"
Blade as well, that's what it's called.
What if it was called, like, what if each sequel was, like, another word that meant the number? Like, you've got Blade Trinity. What if the second one's, like, Blade Chimera? Or something like that. That could be fun.
Right.
Blade Duality.
Duality, I love that.
Duality's a cool sequel name.
Blade Deuce.
Nothing to do with the film itself. The film's not really about duality, but... Blade evolved. Because the vampires evolved.
Blade Ace.
Blade, vampires evolved. Is that like the Need for Speed titling scheme or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Combat Evolved.
Yeah. Is that Halo?
Need for Speed, Combat Evolved.
But the first Halo is
the first
Combat
Halo
Evolved.
is called. Yeah.
It's not even the second Halo.
Yeah.
All right.
Advanced Warfare. Anyway, so we've got a few segments here. Could we move on to continue the franchise now, right?
Yeah. I guess so, if you want.
I feel like we have so many fucking segments
Well,
now.
Sometimes we just don't do them.
Yeah. All right, let's not do continue the franchise.
No, we always do continue the franchise. But we don't always do dumb IMDb trivia. Well, dumb IMDb trivia is now sprinkled across the whole thing.
I didn't do any... Today, the TV commercial that mislabeled Jessica Biel as Jessica Alba was a piece of IMDb trivia, and it was dumb in the sense that it's dumb that this happened, but it's a good piece of trivia.
Yeah.
So, there's been a few continuations already. One that people listening to this might already know about. Some maybe they don't. In October 2008, Blade director Stephen Norrington was developing a prequel trilogy to Blade, featuring Stephen Dorff reprising his role as Deacon Frost. In 2016, Underworld actress Kate Beckinsale stated that a crossover sequel to Blade Trinity with the Underworld film series had been in development, but was cancelled after the film rights reverted back to Marvel in 2012.
Yeah, it does feel
Marvel,
like
the film studio that beholdens the MCU, now owns the character of Blade again. It was owned by, I guess, New Line for a while.
It does feel like you're either a Blade kid or an Underworld kid. You know?
Yeah. Me, I'm a Milky Bar kid.
Yeah. But yeah, Underworld feels like a franchise we're long overdue to take.
Yeah, maybe we'll roll it. Like you've just fucking sealed our fate. I hope you
cracked knuckles. I actually did. Did you hear that? Maybe.
Ow, my knuckles.
My knuckle!
In August 2014, Snipes, that's Wesley Snipes,
oh.
Spoke about his desire to return to the franchise, saying, "I'd be open to it. I think we've got some stones left unturned, and there's some latitude left for us to build on, and I'd love to get back in the suit again and do some things I've learned how to do now that I didn't know how to do then." In July 2015, Wesley Snipes, who played Blade in 3 films before the character's rights reverted back to Marvel, stated that he had discussions with Marvel to reprise the role. So he had discussed it before the rights returned back to Marvel.
Right.
And then on 20th of July 2019, just last year, during the 2019 San Diego Comic-Con presentation, Marvel Studios announced that a Blade reboot set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe will be happening with Mahershala Ali starring as Blade.
Very interesting, because this makes vampires canon in the MCU, which is previously not a thing.
But there'll be like science vampires.
Oh. What do you think of that?
After watching these films, I'm real excited for Mahershala Ali, but I got most excited by just Googling Mahershala Ali and looking through his like previous roles and being like, fuck, he's a good actor.
Do you know what he's in? He's actually in True Detective Season 3 with Stephen Dorff.
But yeah, like just just thinking about Mahershala Ali and being like, what a good actor. While and then remembering that I should actually be watching Blade, which is on TV in front of me. And then being like, oh yeah, I guess Blade is cool as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of tone they take with it. Because apparently that role, they weren't necessarily actively pursuing a new Blade at the time, but Kevin Feige got a call from Mahershala Ali, and he said, when Mahershala Ali calls you, you answer the phone. And essentially he was just like, I want to play Blade. And they were like, fuck yeah.
That's the kind of power I want.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt anyone.
Right, so, have you got to continue the franchise?
I do. Would you like to hear it?
Good. Yes.
Okay. So I was thinking it could be a book, but it could also be a based on a true story movie. The tell-all story of the behind-the-scenes trouble on Blade Trinity from the like assistant of Blade of Wesley Snipes, and how he had to go back and forth and accommodate for Wesley Snipes being such a entitled actor and all those sorts of things going on, and so it's just sort of like a behind the scenes look at what a chaotic film with a massive budget can be like, and it's called Blade's Runner.
Nice. Very good. That is very good. That's very, very, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was inspired by something I said earlier. I inspired myself. Where Stephen Norrington and David S. Goyer decided that crosses wouldn't work against vampires because what if a vampire was Jewish? So I would like to see like a Jewish Blade. Who hunts Jewish vampires, and so this would like
this feels choose your words carefully when you describe this.
But no, like so the group of Jewish actors you would get to play the vampires would be like the Judd Apatow gang. So it's like, you know, like in which one is it? Knocked Up. When they talk about like, if any of us get laid tonight, it's because of Eric Bana's performance in Munich. Then there's because they're celebrating his Judaism in that film. But obviously, you know, I'm not gonna whitewash Blade. I'm gonna get an African American Jewish actor to play Blade, and I've decided on Eric Andre as Blade.
I would love an Eric Andre Blade movie, dude. I love Eric Andre. I'd love to see... there's two ways to approach this. There's either you change Blade or you change Eric Andre. And that option is almost the more exciting to go for. Is like, oi, what if it's like Eric Andre? You have to play it the same way Wesley Snipes played it, and it's a serious movie. What does Eric Andre look like when he's actually trying to act? You know, That's the question. Cool. Well, that's great. I think an odd. So there's nothing deeper than just mentioning Judaism before. Do they use Stars of David as in place of crosses?
I don't know enough about. I don't want to say anything insensitive here, so I wouldn't write the film. You know, it would be like a Judd Apatow. It would be directed by Judd Apatow, starring Seth Rogen as Whistler and Pete Davidson as Deacon Frost. I don't know if he's Jewish, actually. I was just trying to think of a younger person who
let's look it up
with recently.
What about Larry David as Whistler?
Yes. Yeah, Larry David as Whistler. Seth Rogen as Deacon Frost.
He's Jewish ancestry, raised Catholic.
No. So, I don't know, just get them all there.
He was raised Catholic, dude. The Judaism Blade movie is not going to be well received if a Catholic is playing central. But he's the villain. Yeah. There you go.
What are the African American Jewish actors we got? Daveed Diggs from Hamilton.
Oh yeah. I love Daveed Diggs. He's great. He'd be a good Blade, sure.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Okay, cool. So,
What's it called? Jewish Blade?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay, so now we only got a couple of segments left. So now what we do is we rank dat French.
Ah, yes. I'll pull up.
I'm going to edit this list. Add film Blood. So we recently got a new film in the number 2 spot, which was The Godfather. So Blade at number 3, are we thinking? Or where do you think you're putting that?
Yeah, 3, definitely. We watched 2 of the best trilogies of all time right next to each other. This is on Letterboxd, by the way. If you want to go to letterboxd.com/cultpopture, we've ranked every franchise we've ever covered. Okay, so where's a good starting point with Blade?
Okay. Do we think it's above or below the Nymphomaniac Constant? The Nymphomaniac Constant being the most perfectly average franchise, because the quality of the films cancels out each other.
Yes, I think it is better than the Nymphomaniac Constant. And I also think it's better than Mighty Ducks, which is the first one.
Is it better than the Expendables?
What do you think?
If you said, Richard, you have to watch another one, like you have to watch an Expendables film again or a Blade film again, I would choose a Blade film.
I agree. So we're above Expendables, which is at 44. Is it better than An American Werewolf in London and then Halloween are our next franchises?
Should we keep all our spooky films together?
Very appropriate. But I don't know, because then you've got that...
Above those is The Hangover, and I don't think the Blade... I don't think Blade reaches the heights of the first Hangover.
You don't reckon? I reckon it does. I reckon just with Del Toro alone.
Yeah, sure, okay. Is it better than The Love Bug?
Yes.
Is it better than Jaws?
No. No, well, why is Jaws so high?
Because the first one's real good.
Well, let's put it between... I think it goes between National Treasure and The Love Bug.
Okay, so it's not as good as National Treasure, but it's better than The Love Bug. Cool. Putting it there at number 39.
Woohoo.
In between National Treasure and The Love Bug. Of course, The Love Bug refers to the Herbie franchise. All right, now, this is a very special edition of Franchise Roulette. At the end of every other episode, we will... we roll a random number generator. We're not really rolling it. It's an app on my phone. I push a button. And then... It's
not really roulette.
Yeah. And then it corresponds to a list of film franchises. And the corresponding number decides what we cover. Since AJ's obsessed with covering spooky things all month, we have made a spooky franchise list. AJ's just left. He's back.
Sorry, I tried to click onto another tab and accidentally clicked refresh. I was like,
AJ back. Just momentarily left the call, and I was left like, is he doing this because he doesn't like me accusing him of saying, like, oh, we have to do spooky things? And you're like, just fuck you. That's the end of the podcast. So I've got the film franchise list up, and a new kind of segment we're going to officially introduce is that when we do franchise roulette, one person rolls it and gives clues to the other person. Guess that franchise. We've got rank that franchise roulette, guess that franchise.
And whose turn is it to guess?
Oh, well, I've got it up, so I'm going to do it.
Okay. Is this going to be the deciding way of doing it each time?
Yep. And I tell you what, mate, it's going to fall on me most of the time.
And so this is, these are spooky franchises for
yeah. And so it's not just like necessarily horror movies. Blade would have been on here had it been, although looking at the list now, it is mostly horror movies.
There's Halloween Town. That's not a horror.
Oh, spoilers for the fucking list, AJ. Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry.
Well, now we have to do Halloween Town because they know it's on there. Cut this part out. Anyway, okay, so there's 42 franchises on this list compared to our usual 130-something. So... 28. Fucking hell. Holy shit.
What?
What do you think it is?
Is it Halloween Town?
It fucking is Halloween Town.
Are you serious?
I fucking am. Go look.
Go look. Go look. What?
Why? Oh, God.
Are you mad at me?
I am. You ruined it.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, my God.
Look at that. 28 Halloween Town.
4 films.
That's insane. That's actually insane. What was the one that what one did you say just before? They were like, oh, it'll be that one because you said it.
Underworld.
Yeah.
Underworld's 39. Underworld.
But you had to go and mention another franchise after that. And now we're doing Halloween Town. But you know what? I know nothing. I know nothing about Halloween Town.
It's a good franchise to do. Like, it's Halloween. Yeah. It's like funny. A Disney. It's a decom. It's a series of decoms.
Yeah. All right. Let's have a look. So we've got Halloween Town, Halloween Town 2, Calabar's Revenge. I'm presuming Calabar is a character from the first film. Halloween Town High and Return to Halloween Town. Now, let me just check, since these are all Disney Channel original movies. I'm guessing they're on Disney Plus, but so if you want to play along at home, we
just can. Log into our Disney Plus account.
We'll put the details on screen now.
What is Death Note a spooky franchise? It's on here. All right.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
They are, all 4 of those are on Disney Plus if you want to watch them at home.
You might be mad at me, but I think it's a good franchise.
No, it is good. And it's funny that we landed on that. And the insane levels of improbability. A 1 in 42 chance. Almost incalculable.
This does happen to us a lot, though.
Yeah. So much so that if I was a fan of the show, I would be getting suspicious.
God, that is weird. That's weird. Look, I'm not afraid to say it, Richard.
Do you know what? It's spooky is what it is.
Oh, then it's appropriate, even though Halloween Town is one of the rare non-horrors on there. I can't believe this happened. I'm so numb to it now, though. It's happened so many times.
I've become so numb.
And I've gotten so excited so many times when it has happened. Remember when we got Kill Bill right after Nymphomaniac? And after we just talked about Kill Bill for like...
Hated that. Anyway, oh, fuck yeah, these are all like 80 minutes.
Yeah, dude! Fuck yeah, man! And they'll be fun as well. I think I've seen the first one a long time ago. It was one of those... On in the middle of the day during the school holidays.
Okay, well, let's save some of the discussion for next week.
No!
No, we're only halfway through this podcast. I'm going to struggle to remember what I know about Halloween Town.
Well, anyway, look, guys, thank you for following along. Hope you're excited for Halloween Town next week and next fortnight. Sorry, next week we're going to be doing something else, something special, something a little spooky. So that'll be fun. We will actually be announcing what that is earlier because people should be given the opportunity to prep for a certain aspect of it. Anyway, this is a weird way of saying that this is the end of the show. If you enjoyed it, please consider supporting Cult Popture on all the various social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Or you can email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. You can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/cultpopture. You can also join our Discord server, which is you can find various links to, including in the show notes of this episode. And you can also find it it's our sticky tweet. It's our pinned tweet. So you can find it there. What else can people do if they want to get in contact with us, Richard?
Join the Discord.
DM us on the Discord. All our DMs are open on every single medium, on every single platform if you wanted to talk to us. So do all that. Join us. Join the cult. And stay tuned for the post-credit scene coming up momentarily.
Richard, spooky post-credit scene, no doubt.
No doubt, dude. No doubt. It actually is. No, last week's one was. This one isn't. Fuck.
Anyway.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed Blade.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the post-credit scene. This is a scene at the end of each episode where if you donate $5 or more on our Patreon, you get to give us something to talk about, something to do, something to play in the end of the episode. And this question comes to us from Dan Connell on the Patreon, and he asks a classic, an age-old question of the Cult Popture fan base. What is a franchise you are not looking forward to watching? And look, before we allowed our patrons to suggest and vote on franchises for us to cover, I would have happily told people, and maybe I did, what the franchise I was least looking forward to covering was. But now that they will listen to this and know what ones we don't want to cover. We have been a bit secretive over the last few years, though at the same time, I think the secrets have got out as like, I think like a lot of our listeners are like people we are close to in real life, who we've had these conversations
say
with.
that.
So, not a lot of them, but some of them. And so I think the cat's out of the bag a bit. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time we do this franchise that we've been dreading since.
Well, maybe we'll do it as like our first one next year. A similarly torturous fucking long series of films to James Bond. Before we say that, and maybe we will, but maybe we won't say what it is. But I like, for me, it's the franchises that I don't look forward to are the ones that like just aren't interesting. You know, like. Yeah. The ones like because people always go like, does this count as a franchise? Because like they have this in common, or like does Pixar count as a franchise? Does Tarantino count as a franchise? And it's like when you can't look at what a sequel does, that's not interesting, you know? Like, so doing like one film and its sequel without like having a guest, it's just me and you, and it's like the films aren't really related. It's like because this ultimately is a podcast about franchises and like the art of a sequel. Yeah. So that's why like something like A Star Is Born isn't a franchise, because there's 4 adaptations of the same thing, and it's like we can't talk about building a franchise from that, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's certain films, and also when they don't like stay in the public consciousness as well. So something like Critters and even like Romancing the Stone, because it's like not only is it just 2 films, but it's like yeah, no one's going to click on that episode specifically.
And they were like back to back with the Nutty Professor as well. That was a hard time for the podcast. Was those 3 franchises?
Those are the first 3 franchises we did after you moved back to Christchurch as well.
Yeah.
And that's the famous "we're in different cities" era when you pointed that out at the start of every episode.
Yeah, I'd agree that there's a certain je ne sais quoi, or as the Italians said, I can't remember what it was.
It was weeks ago now.
That certain franchises don't have or do have, depending on if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Where it's like, do you want to hear us talk about this?
Yeah, like you know, I don't know. Maybe people just want to hear us talk about like Tarantino, but it's like. It's not.
We can do that as a different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We've talked about. It did Kill Bill.
Yeah.
Eat up.
Which arguably isn't a franchise. Anyway, there is some franchises out there, and because it's really heated up in the last few weeks that like, not showing people the franchise list.
Yeah, on the Discord, everyone's asking to see the franchise list, and we refuse. It's impolite to ask. In some cultures, it's actually considered very rude to ask to see someone's franchise list.
What's your reasoning for not showing people? Like, how would you articulate it?
So things move around, and occasionally, certain decisions are made based on the good of the podcast and the good of the content that are removed from episodes that could be seen as us using the wiggle room we're allowed with not having anyone else see it in front of us that we could get pulled up on. It doesn't happen a lot. It's happened a few times, and again,
it's things like the example I would give is that like if we know October is coming up, like we're in the middle of at the moment, I think I can't work out when this is coming out. That like, and we're planning. We do Halloween, and then we roll randomly on a franchise which would require us to do 2 weeks, meaning that we wouldn't be able to do Halloween, or we would have to push it out of it's like usually when we're tying it into like a theatrical release, and it's like, okay, we've got this date marked on the calendar, and then if we get Lord of the Rings before then, that means we have to do The Hobbit the following week, and we can't do it, so we just re-roll. But people will be like, no, you cheated, it's supposed to be random. It's like, it still is random.
It still is random, and also I'll say this, we've never not done a franchise we've landed on because it was too hard. That has never happened.
Yeah,
the reason for the gimmick of the list to be there has never been like betrayed. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like we've
yeah.
never cheated in the sense because it would be too hard. If you look at the fucking series that we've covered, do you really think we would have let ourselves do The Land Before Time if we employed
if we were just secretly choosing? It is like every decision we have made, like even if you argue it goes against the sanctity of what you might think the podcast is, it's for the good. It ended up with better content.
Exactly. We are, in the end, content creators. Behind the facade of friendliness, we are trying to make something here.
So anyway, Dan, I hope that answered your question as to why won't we show you the franchise list? That was the question, right?
A question I was scared to answer that wasn't asked. Okay, Dan, what is a franchise I'm not looking forward to watching? Do we want to say what the Holy Grail one is? Or?
Well, so there's the Holy Grail one, but I know it's going to be torturous to watch, but I'm not necessarily not looking forward to doing it.
If this podcast ended before we did that franchise, I would be disappointed.
Yeah. But it's going to be an arduous task to watch.
Yes. And that franchise is...
I'll just cut it there.
Should we? I don't care. If you want to cut it put like a car going past or something.
Yeah, just like a cacophony of sound.